Hello, white headsets. My name is Chris Rogers. I'm a business development manager with the global storage BD team here at AWS. Happy to be talking to you today about how to make your data move, some best practices and some demonstrations for migrating your data to AWS. With that, let's get started. Since this is the last session of the day, all of these sessions have already happened. So this is kind of a post advertisement. But as you're looking for recordings of storage-minded sessions, these are some that I would highly recommend you checking out and taking a look at. But given that this is the last session, and kudos to all of you for making the trek all the way up here to the third floor on the last day of the show for the last session. I really appreciate you sticking around. Maybe it's just because there's happy hour later, I don't know. But hopefully this will be an informative session, give you some tips and tricks, some things that hopefully if you're builders, like most of you probably are, you can take back to your organizations and use very, very quickly. So as far as an agenda, I want to start off by giving you some best practices, some questions to consider when you're thinking about moving data to AWS and migrating data. Any organization has data usually scattered in many different places, many different kinds of data, many different kinds of workloads. It can be like cleaning out a closet that you haven't touched in many, many years, right? You just don't know where to start. You're looking at this big pile of data, essentially, and you don't know where to start. So we'll go over some key questions, maybe to give you some ways to think about it, to start to approach your data migration. Then we'll jump in quickly to a few services that can help you move data. AWS Transfer for SFTP, and I'll do a demonstration of how to set that up and how to get up and running. AWS Snowball. I do not have a demonstration for Snowball. That's a ruggedized container, weighs about 50 pounds. I don't happen to have one here today, but there is down in the Partner Expo, you can go and you can see them. I can tell you I am able to bench press those above my head, so I'm still pretty happy about my physical conditioning. We were playing around yesterday. And then I'll talk about AWS DataSync, which is a data mover, think network acceleration for AWS, and I'll do a demonstration of that as well. Then we'll get things wrapped up in time for you to get out of here. So when you think about migration, as you have more and more critical workloads that need to move to the cloud, whether it be maybe life sciences data, medical records, just unstructured data, structured data, maybe you're in the manufacturing space, regardless of your vertical, there are many different kinds of workloads and you need to move increasingly large data sets along with them. And so you need ways to be able to move this data. We actually have 11 distinct services within the AWS family of services that allow you to move data into S3. I'm not going to go through all 11, like I said, but we are going to talk about a few of those today. Some of the key questions that I'd like you to think about as you think about data migration. First one is why, right? Start with why. There's a book called Start With Why, right? Why are you and your teams moving the data to the cloud? What are you going to do with it once you get there, right? Is it just for backups? Do you need to run database queries in the cloud? Do you need to do some kind of processing on that data? Does it save you money, right? How many people would look at moving data to the cloud or as part of your cloud journey, you think about cost reduction? Show of hands. Yep, excellent. And those are also the people paying attention, so I appreciate you raising that, right? Cost reduction comes in quite often, right? But it's important for each and every one of you, as you're looking to move data to the cloud, to think about why you're moving that data. If you don't know that, the rest of the journey will be quite difficult and maybe quite inefficient. Second, kind of sounds obvious, but what data sets are you moving, right? I talk to customers all the time that struggle with this. It might sound simple, right? You have your data in your organization, but oftentimes you don't know where all your data is. And that doesn't mean that's anyone's fault or anything like that, but where your data resides, what the data is, what has to be moved to the cloud, what can be discarded. Maybe you have data that's been hanging around for quite some time and you don't need to move it. And certainly you might want to help to move costs or reduce costs by moving only the data sets that you need in the cloud. Okay. What data sets might you move first? What might go next, right? Prioritize that data. Those kind of questions are important for you and your team to talk about. Where are you going to move the data? We're going to give you some options for where you can move the data. Certainly with AWS, we have the simple storage service, also known as S3, which is kind of a starting point. put that data in a bucket. You can then access it from many other services within AWS. There's also other storage tiers that can save you money and help you get access to your data very, very efficiently, depending on what the workload is. If you were here for the previous session, the session was about Glacier Deep Archive, which is another storage tier for colder data, right? So there's many different options as far as where you'll put your data. Will you put it in a database? Will you do queries against it? Will you run processing on it? What will you do with the data once you get it to the cloud? I talk about storage. Storage is kind of an enabler for all these other services. When do you need the data to be available, right? Certainly when you start a migration, there's many ways to go about migrating your data. You can migrate it offline, as in the case of a Snowball or Snowmobile. You can migrate it online, as is with the case of Transfer for SFTP in AWS DataSync. It's really about how much bandwidth do you have available, whether the online or offline migration services are right for you. But depending on when you need that data to be available will drive the service that you use, as well as the way in which you move that data. And then finally, kind of to drive to that question, how much available network bandwidth do you have? And sometimes when I talk to customers, they actually start with this question, because then it kind of falls into the other questions. But if you have available network bandwidth and you have enough of it, then you can get started moving your data with a service like AWS DataSync, for instance. Okay? So these are some of the questions you want to take a look at. The efficiency of the migration really depends on addressing most of these questions. It doesn't mean it needs to take you months or years to go through these, but many of your organizations, I think, would benefit from going through an exercise like this and asking these questions, right? And understanding what that means to your organization. It's not something that we at AWS can answer for you. We can help you and certainly guide you, but it's really something you need to think about from your own perspectives. So the why, let's kind of dive deeper into some of these questions. The why are you moving to AWS? We talk to customers all the time that tell us many different reasons why they move their data into the AWS network. Number one, you see those four categories across the top: agility, development productivity, right? Data center consolidation, digital transformation, just trying to move your data, get access to your data in a much more efficient way than you ever have. And then I mentioned cost reduction, right? Data center consolidation is a big one. How many people still manage and maintain data centers today? Right, still have infrastructure, and that's great. A lot of the services that we have allow you to continue to do that, or if you'd like to get out of the data center business entirely, you can move along that spectrum, right? So that you could get rid of and get yourself out of the business of managing data centers, because primarily, or quite often, that's not core to your business, managing infrastructure and network infrastructure and storage infrastructure and the like. There's also some less common, I guess, reasons for moving to AWS: acquisitions, large-scale compute-intensive workloads that may only need compute for a week or so. Maybe real estate. Maybe you're downsizing your real estate, trying to reduce your real estate footprint. Maybe co-location or outsourcing, right? So there's a lot of reasons why organizations tell us that they want to move to AWS. As far as the where to put your data, there's over 160 services on AWS to answer that question. We're not going to go through them all today, right? But certainly you have, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention databases like RDS and Aurora and Redshift and Dynamo and on and on and on. Also, on the storage side, we have products like DataSync and Transfer for SFTP and Storage Gateway. Cloud & Door is a company that AWS acquired back in January of this year. And Cloud & Door does a lot with moving VM in real time, VMs, virtual machines, over to the cloud and giving you a backup strategy for your VMs. And then there's a whole variety of other services, certainly here, across block and file and object. As far as the when do you need your data, okay, so this is a little bit of an eye chart. My background's in networking, so I'm happy to go into the mathematics behind this chart with anyone out at the Meet the Speaker podium. We can slice and dice the math many different ways. It really all comes down to the assumptions that we make. So in this chart, just to be very clear, we assume about 25% network overhead, okay? You can say less, you can say more, times will vary, but I just want to be very transparent and say this is about looking at 3 different types of bandwidth: 100 megabits, 1 gigabit, and 10 gigabits across the top, and then many different file sizes or data set sizes across the left-hand column, up from 1 terabyte all the way up to 10 petabytes. Okay, so you can see there if you transfer 1 terabyte, not so much data in this day and age, over a 1 gigabit link takes about 3 hours. Okay, this is standard network protocol, standard TCP, if you will. Takes about 3 hours. You can do better than that with some compression and acceleration techniques that you can put into play. Certainly we have services like DataSync that can improve upon that as well. But if you start to think about migrating a petabyte of data, let's say, or even 10 petabytes of data over that 1 gig link, that could be literally hundreds of days, if not years. Okay, and this isn't about whether it's 124 days for 1 petabyte. You might say you can do it faster, and I would believe you. It might take longer, and I would believe you. Right? It's not about the specific numbers. It's about the fact that you have a lot of data to move. We commonly talk to customers that have multiple petabytes of data, right, in their organizations. When you try to think about moving multi-petabyte workloads into the cloud, it gets very tricky, right? Because you don't want to be the guy that's going to say to your manager or your executive staff, hey, it's going to take us 4 years to get to the cloud, right? You want to do that faster. So the when is very important in this process. So how can you get your data into AWS? I mentioned that there's 11 different services that allow you to move data into AWS. There's 7 of them represented here. And I like this slide because it breaks up. On the left side, you see online data transfer. So this is if you have network bandwidth available, and you can use services like S3 transfer acceleration, Amazon Kinesis data firehose for streaming data into S3. And then you can also use services that we're going to talk about today, transfer for SFTP and AWS DataSync. And then you get into the offline, Snowball, AWS Snowball Edge. And if you're really ambitious and you have tens or 20 or more petabytes, you could talk about a snowmobile, which is a 18-wheeler that we will drive to your facility and plug into your network and let you fill that up with lots of data. Right? If anyone has that kind of use case, definitely want to talk to you at the Meet the Speaker out in the hallway. So love to hear about that opportunity. Love to hear about any opportunity, honestly. And then we have on the hybrid side, Snowball Edge gives you some compute at the edge, so you can do some pre-processing before that data goes into the cloud. You could, iron out your data. You could weed out data that you don't want to move to the cloud, for instance. You could process images, process databases, do some housekeeping kind of chores. AWS Storage Gateway gives you the ability to work with data that then has been moved into the cloud. It is moved into an S3 bucket, for instance, but gives you access from on-premises. So if you have applications that need to remain on-prem, you can do that with Storage Gateway, and you can migrate those applications that can go and live in the cloud, and you can still have access to that data from your premises. So AWS Transfer for SFTP. And if you're getting sick of me talking, I have a demo coming up in about 3 or 4 minutes, so bear with me. So what is SFTP? SFTP workflows have been around for a long time. How many people have SFTP in their organizations today? Right, public sector, not surprised to hear that at all. How many people have had SFTP for, say, more than 5 years? Keep your hands up. 10 years? Anybody more than 20 years? I think I lost everyone. All right. 10 years, for those of you who didn't look around, there were several of you, probably a dozen of you, a dozen hands were in the air. SFTP has been around for a long time. All right, very reliable way to share data, maybe internally within your organizations, within your own business, or also with your business partners. And so that's why we created the Transfer for SFTP service. It launched last year at reInvent in 2018, and it is very applicable in verticals like financial services, retail, healthcare, government, military organizations, where it's very, very important to be able to transfer data efficiently and securely. So what is Transfer for SFTP? It is a fully managed SFTP service. So that fully managed means that it can scale up or down as needed. So maybe you roll it out and you have 100 users, but maybe down the road you have thousands of users that you adopt and you bring in. You may have several dozen, several hundred, several thousand SFTP instances out there in your organization, and you might want to be able to bring that data into one umbrella, if you will. That would be putting that data into SFTP, into S3 buckets. So SFTP, Transfer for SFTP, can help you corral that data in a sort. Okay? Gives you seamless migration of existing SFTP workflows. You could literally make this transparent to the users so that their login, their authentication doesn't change. and the domain, the instance that they're talking to just moves into the cloud, but they are still talking to the same domain name essentially, right? So you can make that very transparent. The users can be none the wiser that they're even transferring data to and from the cloud. Okay, and there's all kinds of permissions that you can set so that users can only see what they're supposed to see, and so on and so forth. It's a fully managed AWS service. It's simple to configure and deploy, and I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. It's secure and compliant. It's cost effective. You pay for what you use, a traditional AWS mentality, and you have native integration with AWS services. So how does it work? So you have clients out there. Pick your favorite client. FileZilla, CyberDuck is the one I'm going to be using here, and there's dozens of others, SFTP clients that have been around for quite some time. And you authenticate to the Transfer for SFTP service, which resides in AWS, and is connected to an S3 bucket. So the service, think of it as an instance rather than a physical server that you might be managing, or a virtual machine that you might be managing on your, in your facility. The service then is moved to the cloud. You can point your very same domain name at it and then link it to an S3 bucket. Once that data is in that S3 bucket, like I said before, it's accessible by a variety of other services, AWS services. You can also use your own identity protection, identity authentication. So if you have Microsoft Active Directory or your own authentication mechanism that you want to use, Transfer for SFTP can do that and therefore help you move data securely, move those workloads securely to AWS. All right, so now I'm going to jump over to the demo. The folks at the back would switch over so you can see my laptop. There we are. And I got my password right on the first time, so that's already a good start to this demo. All right, so what I'm going to take you through right now is I'm going to show you, and I'm going to make this a little bigger because I apologize for the, there we go. I think that's more readable. Can people read that okay? Yes? Good, thank you. Thank you also for paying attention. I'm going to show you Transfer for SFTP, so I'm going to start by going to the AWS console. Remember, there's nothing physical to deploy here, right? So this is all from within the console. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an instance. I'm going to create a user, and then I'm going to show you using the CyberDuck client that I'm going to transfer some files. By the time I get to the point where I transfer some files, that's just kind of academic, right? I think you guys can follow on here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to select Transfer for SFTP, and I'm going to most simply do that just by searching for it. You also see I have bookmarks there from previous. So I have not done anything yet with Transfer for SFTP. I apologize about the resolution kind of bumping around. So I'm going to choose this big bright orange button over here, Create a Server. Okay, so now I go into the Create Server configuration. I'm basically creating an instance, right? And this is going to be part of the managed instance. So I have a couple choices here to look at. I can make this public, part of my publicly accessible endpoint, or I can make it in my VPC, so it's only accessible in my VPC, right? So certainly it can leave that. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to be choosing public just because I want to be able to access it. I do not have a VPC set up. I can also choose, and I'm not going to here today, but I can also choose a custom host name. So this is where you can choose one that you already have. Use a host name that's already set up in an external DNS. So if you already have a host name registered, it's really easy to point right to it. You can also use Amazon Route 53 DNS as well. Okay, and then I can choose an identity provider. I can choose a custom provider, Amazon via a gateway URL. But again, I'm going to leave this. This is a pretty simple demo today. I'm going to leave these things all pretty much straightforward. I can also opt to have a logging role, so I can log all SFTP events into CloudWatch, and I can also put tags on data. So I can do some tagging here for management of other services. So like I said, it integrates with AWS services like CloudWatch and CloudTrail. Okay, so now make that a little smaller. So now I have a server, and this is the server ID, kind of this long-winded code here. And you see a couple things. I have a server configuration, and it's starting up. So we're basically spinning up the resources in the AWS cloud. I did not choose any of the custom configurations, so you see that we have our identity provider, our authentication is service managed. And here's my endpoint. Here's my server. So real quick, I'm just going to grab this and copy that to the clipboard. And while I'm waiting for my server to get started, I'm going to go ahead and click Add User. I need a user to be able to authenticate here. So real simple, my name is Chris. I'm going to choose Chris. And then I'm going to choose a home directory here. And my home directory is going to be a bucket that I've already created called Rogers-SFTP. And I'm also going to choose a role, and this is an IAM role, and it's called, I've already created this, it's called SFTP Transfer. And you can think of the role, the IAM role, as being able to not only give access to the S3 bucket, but authenticate the SFTP service to transfer data into my account ID. Okay, so I've assigned it a role. I've set that up ahead of time. Just it's like one of those cooking shows, right? It kind of pre-bakes the casserole a little bit, but it's very simple to do, and it's all documented very well. So I set that up for SFTP transfer. Now I need to add a public key. So instead of using a password here, SFTP is more secure because I can use a public key. So I've gone to the trouble of putting my public key right here in a browser just so I can copy it easy enough. And I'm going to now paste my public key just like that into that field. And then I'm going to click add. I can also add a tag to this user as well. If I wanted to call it a finance user, or HR, whatever, I might want to tag that user with. And so now I've successfully created the user Chris, and you can see that down here. Hopefully you can see that. Username is Chris. Rogers-SFTP, my S3 bucket, is my home directory, and the role is SFTP transfer. That's the IAM role that I created. Okay, so now I'm all set here. I'm going to minimize my browser. Oop, that's for the next demo. And I'm going to go to CyberDuck. And CyberDuck is this very simple SFTP client here, and I'm going to simply create a connection. And I know that that's small, and I don't think I can zoom that in at all, unfortunately. But I'm going to choose SFTP protocol here. And up here, I'm just going to paste my server name. I have my username as Chris. And in the, I should have been more clear, when I pasted that key, that was the public key. And so now on my private machine, I'm going to go and access my, my private key. And so I'm going to select that here real quick. It's called transfer key private. And then I'm going to click connect. And of course, my network didn't want to work here.
Yeah, you put your key in.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. And it harkens back to that commercial where the guy's like, I pointed it to the wrong key. You're right. I don't think it did. Oh, you're right. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go back here. I was just testing you guys. Go back here, minimize that. There's my connection. There we go. Just as it is an unknown fingerprint, I'm going to say allow. Now it's authenticating, logging in successful, listing the directory, and there we go. Now I am looking at my bucket. I have nothing there. I do want to jump back over here real quick to show you that my sorry about this, bear with me here. Too many windows. All right, so I wanted to show you that I have under S3, my bucket is empty. The other thing I want to point out about this bucket is that everything is going to be encrypted. So we are going to be moving data with SFTP, and I've selected AES 256-bit encryption for data at rest. So in flight and at rest data will be secured. Okay. So now I will go back to the bucket here, and I'll bring up CyberDuck, move this guy out of the way, move all these guys out of the way, and then I just have some demo files. So I'm going to copy this file. This has just got some sample files, nothing real special, a Word doc, a video, and I'm just going to simply drag this, and now you can see that it's authenticating. It's going to start to copy here pretty quick. And once that starts copying, we'll go and look from the perspective of our bucket, and I'll just refresh that. And you can see that now I have a directory here, and now I have these files. And like I said, this is kind of the academic part. The upload is complete. And just to prove to you that these are encrypted, if you can see that, AES 256-bit encryption on that file. So on my laptop, it's not encrypted, right? For a user, it's not like it's an encrypted drive or anything, but it's encrypted when it gets to the cloud. So very easy to do. What did that take me? About 5 minutes, something like that, right? I set up a server, set up a user. Granted, I had pre-configured the role, but talk about another 5 minutes, that's it. And I was able to copy data into my bucket. Now, if you think about having many different SFTP instances pointing at a bucket, you could point them at different folders within that bucket. It becomes a great way to organize that data. Okay? If I can switch back over to my slides, that's the SFTP demo that I wanted to show you. We'll keep going, and we'll talk about AWS DataSync. I don't know who I need to kind of wave at or get their attention to switch my slides over, please. Can we switch back? I just need to switch my slides back. There we go. Okay, cool. I don't really know who I'm looking at. There we go. Thank you very much. They said to just kind of gesture and they'd be paying attention, and someone was looking somewhere. Anyway, so that's the transfer for SFTP demo. So I want to talk real quick about Snow Family. Again, I said I did not have a Snowball here today, but there is one down in the Partner Expo if you want to go check it out. But Snowball is, in Snowball Edge specifically, which was launched last year, is really quite a transformational product. It's a pretty significant product because it gives you the ability to move data from either remote locations that just might not have good connectivity, or locations where you have maybe secure environments like the military, healthcare, industrial research. Maybe it's on a boat, in a car. Who knows where it might be. But Snowball gives you the ability to put not only storage out there so you can move data, but also edge computing. And so if you look at the Snowball family lineup, you have Snowball, you have Snowball Edge, and you have Snowmobile. And they go from Snowball, which is data transfer only, so think of it as just a bunch of disks on a ruggedized box. It has a 10 gig network port. You can store up to 80 terabytes of capacity and basically move that data, then send it to AWS. Literally, the shipping label is a e-ink screen, just like the Amazon Kindle. It is an Amazon Kindle in the box. And when you fill it up with data and you shut it down and you close it, the address changes. You drop it off at with your shipping logistics carrier, and it gets taken to Amazon, and we import that data into S3. Snowball Edge adds not only storage capacity, but it gives you the ability to do compute, gives you some compute in those locations where you don't have networking. Maybe you have a research facility or a real remote site, or you're in a vehicle, in a mobile type of vehicle. So you can do some processing, run some services, run some applications on Snowball Edge. You get up to 100 terabytes of storage capacity on Snowball Edge, and you get, again, a ruggedized case and rain and dust resistant and things like that. If you have large workloads, large data sets, 20 petabytes and up, then we would love to talk to you about AWS Snowmobile, which is the 18-wheeler that comes out. It's exabyte scale storage, 45-foot, basically a shipping container that comes on the back of a truck, and you get all the way up to 40 gig networking on that. You get encryption end to end, and you can import that data then into S3 and or Glacier. Okay, so that's the lineup. How does it work? Well, what happens is you go into the AWS console, just like I did for the SFTP demo. You order up a Snowball, the appropriately sized Snowball or Snowball Edge. In 1 to 3 days, you will get a Snowball delivered to your site. And then you will, the job gets provisioned, so it's really anywhere from 1 to 5 days, 2 to 5 days. And then it's delivered to you, you plug it into your network, you start copying data, however long that takes, right? Whether you're copying 100 terabytes or if you're trying to fill up a whole Snowmobile, that will vary, depending on your network, depending on the size of the workload. Then once it's done, like I said, you shut it down, the e-ink label changes, you drop it off with your carrier, and it gets delivered to AWS. And then depending on the workload size, that gets imported into your bucket, the bucket that you specified at the origination of the job. So when you ordered it up originally, the data will get moved into that bucket directly. Okay, pretty straightforward. All told, you're looking at very kind of, depending on where you are in the world, depending on how your workload is, customers I've seen as little as 10 days for this whole process to happen. I've seen as much as 6 months, right? And I'm sure our Snowball guys around can give you kind of more specifics about some customer stories about this, but it's a very efficient process, and it's a great way to move data from sites that do not have connectivity or do not have the network bandwidth to be able to move. We're going to talk about DataSync in a moment, and DataSync, as I mentioned, is the online transfer facility service that we have. And DataSync and Snowball quite often complement each other, because very often you have very workloads that might be hot data that you want to move very, very fast. You might use AWS DataSync for that. And you also might have, in the same organizations, you might have workloads that you don't need to move very, very fast. So you want to order up some Snowballs and do that, or maybe you need to do some processing on that data. So it's quite common that we end up talking to customers about Snowballs and DataSync in the same environment, and we're happy to do that. So let's shift gears a little bit to AWS DataSync. Okay, so what is DataSync? I've mentioned this. It's an online transfer service that simplifies, automates, and accelerates moving data between on-premise storage and AWS. So we can handle transfers up to 10 gigabits. We can fill a 10 gigabit link per agent. So one agent that I'm going to deploy, I'll show you that in a few minutes, can fill a 10 gigabit pipe. So think about this as network acceleration, WAN optimization. We're doing things like accelerating TCP, we're doing compression, parallelization of transfers, many different tricks, if you will, to be able to move the data very, very efficiently and be very performant. We often talk about the AWS DataSync as being roughly 10x the performance of, say, standard rsync or robocopy or some of those more common transfer utilities that are out there. And again, you may argue that point, and we can have that discussion, and I'm happy to. Depending on how you configure rsync, certainly you could probably squeeze some more performance out of that as well. But the thing about DataSync is that you don't have to configure a whole bunch of knobs and whistles and write scripts or dive into window sizes and buffers and things like that. You just deploy the agent, and it's all built in. So it makes it very, very easy to be able to move your data very, very efficiently. Gives you a simple way to move data into S3. So you move it into an S3 bucket or EFS. Okay. Right now, DataSync supports NFS. SMB is on the roadmap in the very near future. So it will be NFS and SMB coming very soon. NFS is what I'm going to show you today. It is secure and reliable. So you can encrypt the data in transit, as you would expect. You can also encrypt it in the S3 bucket or in the EFS file system. It is cloud integrated, so it works with CloudTrail, CloudWatch, many other services as a great way to get data into the cloud and into S3 or EFS, and it's very, very cost effective. Okay, so you get the speed and reliability of network acceleration tools and software with the cost effectiveness of open source tools. One of the things I wanted to point out today is that as of yesterday in Teresa's keynote speech, you may have missed it because it was briefly mentioned, but DataSync is one of the services that's now available in AWS GovCloud in the West region. So that's a big timely launch for us, just launched yesterday. So now you have the ability to securely copy sensitive data between your sites and AWS GovCloud in the West region. Okay. DataSync's available in the following regions. I just mentioned GovCloud as of yesterday, US East, US West, Europe, and Asia Pacific. And you can see all those regions in parentheses, right? So it's available around the world. So wherever you are, there's a region where you can be running DataSync to be able to migrate your data into GovCloud or into AWS commercial. So how does DataSync work? Well, if you start with the on-prem look, AWS is an agent that installs on-prem. Right now, it installs as a VMware agent. We're looking at containers and other ways to bundle and provide access to DataSync that might be more mobile, might be more flexible for many environments. We've had a lot of requests from customers for that, and if you have any of those type of use cases, needs for containers or such, I'd love to talk to you a bit about it afterwards. But it's essentially an agent that deploys on-prem, looks at your NFS host, and again, SMB is on its way shortly, and it talks to the AWS DataSync service, which resides in the cloud. It's a fully managed service, and it's secured via encryption, TLS encryption over the wire. And then you can you can put that data into an S3 bucket or into your EFS system, EFS host. Okay. You get highly parallel transfers using an optimized network protocol. The fully managed service scales to send or receive data from the agent, and you can stack up multiple agents. You can also have multiple sources, multiple NFS sources pointing at a single agent or multiple agents, and we have customers that do that. So it can really be a way to gather your data and collate, your data from many different sources that you might have out there. And again, one agent can fill up to a 10 gigabit per second pipe. Okay, so just think of terms of scale there. And it's optimized reads and writes to S3 and EFS using IAM or VPCE. So how does DataSync deploy? As simple as 1, 2, 3. You deploy the agent on premises, and you start from the console. You'll see that in a moment. You download the VM agent and you deploy it on your VM host. That's really the only work you need to do on premises. Once that agent comes up, the service detects it and activates it, and then all the rest of your work is done from within the console. So very, very simple kind of activation. The agent spins up and looks for the service, and that connection happens very seamlessly. Then you create a task by configuring your source and target locations, and there's also a variety of options that I'll walk you through in the demo. And then you start the task and monitor the progress. Now, DataSync can be used for a one-time migration, so you might start the task, copy a bunch of data, and then stop the task. Or you might start the task and just let it run, and it's basically sweeping that NFS directory, if you will, for changes. So it does essentially a tree walk. It knows what data is in there, and if anything gets added or changed, it knows that, and it will move the changes. So on an ongoing, real-time basis, you can be migrating data into the cloud. This is great for active workloads. This is great for workloads that have a lot of changes that happen, right? And so if you're looking at workloads that, hey, we're changing these data, we're changing our directories and creating a lot of new files, changing file names, DataSync is fantastic for that. Another area where DataSync does very, very well is with small files. We talk to a lot of customers that have a lot of repositories, whether it be logs or reports or things. They're very, very small files, 1K, 2K size files. And you might have millions. I talked to a customer a few weeks ago that has billions of files in their repository. And they want to know how to move this data into the cloud. DataSync does very, very well in those type of situations. If you have any questions about that, please see me afterwards at the Meet the Speaker. Okay. A little bit about security and the management and monitoring and compliance of DataSync. So you can monitor DataSync with CloudWatch. You get detailed CloudWatch logs that track data movement. You can get very, very detailed statistics about files, so you can see which file has moved, and maybe if there was any kind of a network interruption, you can see where you need to pick up from. And DataSync is smart enough to do that if you leave the task running. You can control and audit usage with AWS Identity and Access Management, IAM, and also CloudTrail. And DataSync is also PCI and HIPAA compliant, so very, very secure in that sense. So now I'm going to jump off into my next demo. So if we can switch the slides over, we'll show you DataSync. And I typed my password 2 times out of 2. That never happens, so it's a great day here. So let me get rid of my SFTP information here. Give me a moment. All right, so what I have with DataSync is I have a DataSync agent in a region in Northern California. And I'm going to be, I have that agent connected to a NFS server that's in the Northern California region. For the purposes of my demo, sorry about that, for the purposes of my demo, it's all virtual, that's all in the cloud. Your specific deployment would probably be an agent in a physical NFS host or maybe a virtual machine on your prem. But I'm simulating my on-premises in the Northern California region. So just to show you what I have running in EC2, real quick, I have a couple of instances. I have a NFS storage device here, and then I also have the DataSync agent that I've deployed. And this is going to be talking to our Ohio region, and so I can jump over to Ohio and show you the DataSync agent in a moment. But before I do that, I want to show you what's on this NFS server. And so I want to go into my... I'm going right now, so I'm connecting to my, I'm connected to my NFS host, which is in Northern California. And I have a repository in there that has tens of thousands of JPEG files. The repository that I'm using is actually images that have been grabbed from Amazon fulfillment centers. They're all anonymous data, but basically views of bins of data and things like that. And this might be a repository that you'd use and connect to a web server. I'm not going to show you the web server piece of it today just to try to simplify things, but I did want to show you that the data is there, so give me a moment to connect to that store. And if I just do a simple ls here, you can see there's a whole bunch of JPEG files there. Take my word for it that they are fulfillment data. I didn't just make up 10,000 files. It's a real repository. They all vary in size from probably 30K to 200K, something like that. Fairly small files, but there's 10,000 of them. Total size of about 500 gigs of data. Okay, I'm sorry, 500 megs of data, about a half a gig. Okay, so there's my repository. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to connect to Ohio, which is where my DataSync service is running, and I'm going to, this is all from the console. I'm going to go here and connect to DataSync, and I'm just going to select it from the shortcut bar here. So you can see DataSync here, all that's happened is that I've pre-authenticated the agent, pre-activated the agent. So this is, you would have downloaded the VM image, which is literally an OVA file. You've imported it, you've created the VM image on your virtual host, and authenticated it to the service. Okay, so now what I need to do is I need to define my source and destination locations, and I also need to create a task and run that task. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create the locations first. And you see when I create a location, I have a choice. I can choose from Amazon EFS file system. I can choose an S3 bucket, and I can choose from NFS host. So I'm going to move from my NFS host to my S3 bucket. And the first one I'm going to create is the NFS host, and I'm going to associate that with the only active agent that I have. And pardon me for a sec while I bring up my notes, just so I can cut and paste here instead of fat fingering things. I'm basically pointing it to the IP address of my host and the directory. And that directory is simply /mnt/on-prem/files. That's the one I just showed you the output from. And now I can also tag that data. So if I wanted it to be tagged in a certain way, I could do that. So I'm going to create this location. Remember, I haven't specified this as a source or destination. DataSync can help you copy data up into AWS. You can also pull data down from AWS if you should need to do that. Okay, so I could go ahead and create my task, but I'm going to create my second location. This is going to go real quick at Amazon S3 bucket. And I'm going to choose a bucket that I have set up in Ohio, just called Rogers-Ohio. I could specify a folder. If I had a whole bunch of migrations happening, I could divide them up into red, yellow, blue folders, whatever the data type is, however you wanted to organize it. You can see that the IAM role is automatically assigned here. I didn't do anything. It just picks up that IAM role automatically. Again, I could set optional tags, and I'm going to just click Create Location. So now if I click on Locations, I have two locations, and I'm going to go ahead and create my task. Simply go to Tasks, Create Task. I'm going to choose an existing location. Now I'm configuring my source, right? So this is going to be my NFS host. So I'm simply going to drag down from this drop down here and click Next. Now I want to configure my destination, which is an existing location. Notice that if I hadn't pre-created that or pointed to that bucket, I could go ahead and create a new bucket here. Just a matter of how you want to do it and what's easiest for you. But since I've already pre-created that association with the bucket, I'm going to go and connect there. I can give this a task name. It's optional. You know, if you have multiple tasks running, I would recommend that as a best practice. And then there's some options here that you can set. So verification. One thing that DataSync does is that it will validate and verify that the data that you want to copy actually gets to the destination, whether it's EFS or S3. That's a really key step in the whole process, right? Being able to know that bit for bit, what you copy from your source actually gets to the cloud, it gets to S3 and is verified is very valuable. We've had customers tell us they spend lots of money in the tens of thousands of dollars to validate and verify data. So DataSync does that as an option. And you can see you can uncheck it, right? And so one of the best practices would be to move data. And if it's a fairly small data set like this is, I'm going to leave verification on. But if you have a large, maybe multi-petabyte data set that you're moving, you may want to move most of that without verifying the data and then go back and run the task with verification turned on to just kind of save time later. Verification takes a little bit more time, but it happens automatically as long as you've enabled it. All right, so DataSync handles that. You also have the ability to control metadata options, whether you want to preserve ownership, permission information, timestamps on all of your files, on all of your objects that will be moved into AWS. You can decide whether you want to keep deleted files. And then you can also set bandwidth. You can set a bandwidth limit so that if you're moving data over an active network, which many of us would, you can say that DataSync can only take up let's say 100 megabits of throughput or whatever you decide, right? So you can set a throttle on that, which is a very handy thing, allows DataSync to play nice with others, so to speak, okay? I'm gonna leave all of these as the standard, the defaults here. You can do more tagging, you can integrate this with logging, CloudWatch logs, but I'm just gonna click next. And then I'm going to go ahead and create the task. It basically gives me a review screen here. I look that over, I see my source and my destination, and my options are all of the defaults. And I'm going to go ahead and click Create Task. And of course, this is a live demo, so it failed to create the task for some reason. This did not happen in rehearsal. Everything was going so swimmingly. All right, let me try this. I'm going to go back and just simply recreate the task. And I'm going to choose my locations again. NFS for my source. All right, what's going on here? There it is. I've been logged out. I think it timed out when I was in between. So in the 3 minutes and 32 seconds I have, let me just finish this demo. This is really the last step, so give me a moment. I apologize for the technical difficulties. How many people have done demos before? Feel my pain? It always works every time, right? All right, so you know I'm not like just recording this or anything. You know it's real. So anyway, let me just check. All I did was refresh my screen. I've logged into our lab area and I think it timed me out. So nothing up my sleeve, so to speak. So let me create this task again for the third time now. Choose the location. For my destination, I'm going to choose my bucket. You guys are going to be really good at this. You've seen me do this so much. I'm going to leave this as the defaults, and I'm going to click Next, and then create the task. Look at there we go. That's what it was. So while the task is creating, so it's go ahead and starting, just to kind of point out some things here, I have my source destination of my NFS host. My target is my, my bucket in Ohio. I'm actually going to bring this up. See if I can bring this in a new tab. Show you this bucket. This is Rogers, Ohio. There's nothing in here right now. When I start the task, you'll see data start to move over here. And of course, it wants me to reload. Okay, there we go. So now my task is available. So green light go, that's all good. So now I'm going to click Start. It's going to once again prompt me for all these options. These are the same options that you saw in the setup. I could uncheck verification if I wanted to here. And now I click Start. And when I did this earlier, my task is now running. You can see the status is running. When I did this earlier, it took me about 1 minute and 50 seconds, and my clock here says about 1 minute and 50 seconds. So this is going to be like the big reveal at the end here. You can see that it's launching. What it's going to do now is it's basically walking through the directory, doing a tree walk and seeing what's there. And it's going to go through and just kind of verify the connection to the NFS host and validate that there's data there. And then it's going to start moving the data. And then at the very end, it's going to verify and validate that the data that's been moved is actually there and in that S3 bucket. Can you guys hear me? All right, good. Thank you very much. I think it's because these guys ended. So I think I need another minute at a time. If I can put that in the bank, that would be cool. So my task is running. I'm just doing a refresh to check the status of the task. Even if this doesn't finish and I'm just about at time, this is going through and doing the tree walk. In a moment here, this will update and it will move the data. The 10,000 files, just to give you the punchline ahead of time, takes about 50 seconds or so to move, a minute or so, very, very fast. With that, I'm gonna wrap up. If anyone wants to see this demo, I'm happy to kind of finish it here, but I don't want to cut into your time, especially since happy hour is in about 10, 15 minutes. So with that, let me just say that there's a lot of ways to think about migration. Remember the why, the where, the how, all of those questions. Go through those with your organization. If we can help you, AWS has many different experts. We're all around here. I'll be at the meet the speaker place, and happy to talk to you guys. So thank you very much, and I appreciate your time today.